Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we have some pretty cool and exciting stuff to talk about with the Division 2. Now, I had planned to make a separate PTS video today, but earlier this morning we got a tweet from the dev saying, "Agents, we would like to provide you all with some insights into our findings and next steps that have been determined based on the feedback we received from Phase 1 of the Project Resolve PTS." Now, don't forget, Phase 2 of the PTS is coming a week from today on January 19th, so this is very cool that they're sharing with us, as they call it here, some developer notes about what they thought about Phase 1 and what they plan to change heading into Phase 2. So we have a super long list here of everything that they're talking about, so let's just go through it and I'll give my thoughts on it, and I want to hear yours, of course. So if you enjoy consistent Division 2 coverage like this, then be sure to hit that subscribe button, would greatly appreciate it, and let's dive right in. They start off by saying, "Hello agents, we are immensely grateful for all of the feedback received following Phase 1 of the TU20 and Project Resolve PTS, and we want to share our findings and next steps based on your experiences on the PTS. So we start out with weapons and talents. Enhance the accuracy and stability of some weapons. Our primary focus has been on the performance rather than handleability. Guess that's a word. Modifying accuracy and stability would result in diminishing the unique characteristics of each weapon, potentially leading to a homogenization where all weapons can become identical. Instead, our objective is to ensure that certain weapons are harder to handle, but in turn offer greater power when landing shots. We have decided to refrain from implementing any additional changes for now. However, we will reassess the situation following the release and consider potential adjustments." So I know that was definitely a big request from people, was to see further changes to the weapons, particularly in their handling. Looks like they have no changes for now, but at least they're going to keep an eye on it, so that's a fair response. Alright, Mantis Exotic MR is buffed, too buffed and needs a nerf. We agree that this notion, and it needs to be brought down. The changes will be available in PTS Phase 2. Personally, I didn't hear a thing about the Mantis in Phase 1. I also did not try it myself, so I can't speak on that, but if they think that's the case, then there we go. Here's a big one though. The Dr. Home Exotic Rifle changes were unnecessary. We have reviewed your feedback and determined that the Dr. Home requires a revision, therefore we will be reverting it back to its original version for PTS Phase 2. I think this is really good and also kind of a shame. I liked that they were making it a bit more universal into how many build types and playstyles could use this thing with only landing headshots. That said, the version in Phase 1 was unbelievably busted, so I'm glad. I would rather see them revert it than keep it as it is, but it would have been nice to even add like a 5, 6, 7 second cooldown to it and still make it just the headshot version. Anyway, I'm fine with this, and that's what they're doing. This one, on the other hand, I have zero idea who said this. With all other weapons changing, St. Elmo's Engine Exotic AR feels underwhelming. We hear you and can confirm that we'll be leaving it as is for PvP. Who on earth was saying that St. Elmo's felt underwhelming because of the changes? From my understanding, the only thing this is going to change is going back to having 100% shock ammo in PvP, as opposed to the 50% they implemented in Phase 1. For the love of all things holy and sacred, please switch this back to 50%. 50% is still 35 bullets of shock ammo in PvP. That is still super strong. I was saying they should even take it down further than that. So again, I didn't hear a single person say it felt underwhelming. It's still as strong as it is with its base stats, so I really hope that this can be reverted yet again. But yeah, we'll talk about that more and test it once Phase 2 arrives, but that's certainly an interesting one. Alright, here they said, all rifles should be given a 30 to 50% buff to accuracy and stability. Buffing the handling of every rifle would diminish the individual traits that make each weapon unique, potentially leading to a lack of diversity. Our main objective is preserving the current state of weapon handling, is to ensure a wide variety of weapons remain available. Therefore, we have decided to not implement any changes that would make the rifles too similar. So this sounds very similar to what they were just saying about the overall weapon handling stuff and how they don't want to make any changes for now. Fair enough, if that's what they've determined on their end. I do think that rifles on their own lack a bit of reason to run them compared to marksman rifles or ARs, right in the middle. I don't know if they're too distinctive, but that's what they're saying for now, so we move on. Concerns about the Nemesis, Regulus, and Scorpio exotics getting a bigger buff in PvP now that the third attribute can be reconfigured. We are looking into a nerf for the Scorpio, Nemesis, and Regulus in PvP only. This is actually quite positive, I think. All three of these, actually, I would say the Scorpio is kind of meh, but specifically the Nemesis and Regulus have been really strong in PvP for a while. It's not something I've ever brought up because, you still do have to have a good amount of skill with these weapons. You still do have to land the headshots to really get the full benefit out of it, but it's true that a lot of people run these things and, maybe the builds support them a bit too much. So personally, I appreciate that they're looking into reducing their power in PvP, so I'm looking forward to seeing what that'll be. Moving on, we get to gear. Brand set changes. Thank you for your suggestions. However, we currently do not have any plans to change the brand sets. Our focus is on enhancing the existing stats and not moving them around. I have a feeling personally that this is just kind of a balancing nightmare for them. They're not trying to take on a whole other load of things to consider like that if they start moving around different stats and stuff. But it would be nice in the future to see some changes to brain sets to make some of those ones that are not used much a lot more viable. But that's what they're doing for now. Concerns regarding armor regen scaling in PvP. There's no way. We agree that armor regen buffs are indeed too significant. We have decided to implement adjustments to these buffs for both PvP and PvE to ensure a more balanced and fair experience for all players. I am actually shocked by this. This was a major point that I brought up in my feedback from PTS Phase 1, but frankly, I did not see them making any big changes because it seemed like kind of a big task to tackle. But personally, I am over the moon that we're actually going to see changes to armor regen. I thought the scaling of it was way too off. So whether they do go ahead and implement a modifier to it or whatever other changes they make, I'm really happy to see this because tank metas in the division overall have always been my least favorite periods of the game, and I was really hoping that's not where we were going to be heading with Project Resolve. Hopefully, looks like we're not with this, so I'm super happy about that. Moving on to Conflict. Unbreakable didn't need a nerf. Maybe I beg to disagree. We will be reverting it back to its original version for PTS Phase 2. Again, I'm not sure who was saying this. I guess I did see some people saying that they didn't want Unbreakable changed. Personally, I despise bonuses like Unbreakable, Nomad, things like that just give you extra life for no real investment. I mean, I know you're sacrificing a talent slot. Anyway, I won't get into it. It's not that impactful because they were only reducing it by 10% to begin with, but that's going to happen. Either add more turrets or revert the change. The current implementation of the turrets did not achieve our goal of preventing spawn camping. Considering the technical constraints that prevent the addition of more turrets, we have decided to remove them for now and explore alternative options. This both pleases me and worries me. I agree that the single turret implementation we had in Conflict in Phase 1 did not do the job to prevent spawn camping. However, if in their mind adding more turrets was ever on the table, then I kind of fear that we're not really at the same level of understanding as for why that didn't work. Turrets, at least in the way they were there in Phase 1, won't fix the problem because teams who have a life advantage in skirmish can run back behind them and camp and win because there's no way to get past the turrets. So adding more turrets would have been catastrophic. I'm really glad they're not doing that. I am also really glad that they're going to remove them because, like I said, the majority of us agreed that they didn't work. And I am very curious to see what their alternative options are going to be. Really hope that they come up with a good system that doesn't involve turrets, and then Conflict I think could be a really fun mode with the removal of shade levels and expertise. So very curious to see what comes out of that. But yeah, no more turrets, please. All right, for the Dark Zone, the Rogue activation timer can be shorter. The timer is set up to stop players from going rogue near you. That's kind of funny. To see how a shorter timer would function, we will be adjusting it to 3 seconds for PTS Phase 2. I'm all for that. A lot of people were very against the 5-second one in Phase 1. I didn't really care that much because you can still move around functionally. Like, it's really still the same. But if they want to make it shorter, I will not complain. I feel like that's going to feel a lot better in gameplay. So there we go. Happy with that. Got a lot of items here under Descent. Suggestion to add reconstructed caches at a high price to the NSA shop. It is a great idea, and we are committed to implementing it. The cost of the caches would be very high, though. So there you go. They are going to be adding reconstructed caches, which give you the blueprints for Dark Zone items, for seasonal items to the NSA shop, but they say it is going to have a very high cost. I have a feeling for a lot of people, though, that's not going to matter because they already have stockpiled tens of thousands of NSA credits if you play Descent a lot. But either way, you're now going to be able to buy those, so cool. Next up, even with the session length change, it still takes too long to reach the Nemesis, which I think is kind of silly because you can now do it on loop 4. For me, the problem with Descent after the changes isn't the Nemesis. It's the fact that still if you want to reach like loops 20, 30, 40, you're investing multiple hours. And without any kind of a save and return feature, that's just not tenable for a lot of people. But they say our intention is to gauge the impact of the current changes in a live environment. Based on player feedback, we will make any necessary adjustments in future title updates to ensure the best possible experience. Right now, we want to refrain from further shortening the session length as it can lead to a frustration due to the waiting time between rooms and travel time. Again, I don't have too much to say there. I don't think the Nemesis length itself is the problem. I think it's the overall mode, but we'll see how that plays out when they implement stuff. Alright, don't reduce the number of talents. The implementation of the changes in PTS Phase 1 was not fully completed as the UI with the list of talents available in the rotation was missing. To ensure that players are aware of the current rotation, a comprehensive UI presentation will be added. That's really good. I think being able to see what is currently on rotation for the talents is going to be super beneficial, so I'm glad they're going to add that. We agreed that a 1-week interval might be too long between rerolls. We will explore the possibility of reducing the interval between rerolls. Again, fine with me. I thought 1 week was fine, but if people want it to be shorter, that's totally cool. So yeah, most of the stuff there sounds good. Okay, here's a really big one, the gear lock. This was maybe the most controversial point in the PTS as far as any PvE related stuff in PvE players went, because this ended up appearing in PvE beyond just what they announced for how it would function in the Dark Zone and Conflict. And this was a super, big point for many who were saying if it stayed as is in PvE, they would quit the game, which sounds dramatic. I do understand it because it is a very fundamental change towards how the Division handles its difficulty and gear stuff. But let's see what they have to say, because we got a really big paragraph here. Gear locking has generated mixed opinions, so we would like to provide further insights into our motivations, which is always good. Let's just hear what they think about it and why it's there as it is. The Division 2 is a tactical shooter, meaning that strategic planning and decision-making play a significant role in gameplay. One aspect of this strategy involves choosing and committing to specific gear items before engaging enemies. Allowing players to swap during combat would diminish the tactical nature of the game. It would also introduce complexity, as players would need to be aware of the mechanics of their current gear, as well as other options in their inventory. Which is true, but I also feel like if people want to take on that extra complexity, that's on them, right? It's not a requirement. I personally very rarely change my gear during a mission or anything, but some people like to do that, so I don't know. While some players may excel at managing this complexity, we believe it would make the gear system more difficult for the majority of players to understand and engage with. Additionally, balancing the game's difficulty becomes more challenging, as we would need to consider not only the available builds, but also the potential talent combinations that should not be possible during combat. That I do agree with personally. I've always said that allowing us to switch at any time certainly gives the player a lot of freedom, but it also means that you're having to consider so many more combinations that might not be possible if you just head into combat once with what you have equipped on. So I see both sides there. However, we acknowledge that in certain situations, preventing loadout swapping can be overly restrictive. As a result, we have decided to remove the loadout block for rogues, which was implemented in PTS Phase 1. Oh, I thought this was talking about PvE. I didn't think that the PvP one really mattered that much. Is this not about PvE? Oh, shoot. Because people were very heated about that. So, if they're not making any changes to how it's functioning in PvE, let's just go through this. We ask that you concentrate your efforts on testing it with the following specs during Phase 2. Gear lock while in combat, regardless of game mode, remains as is. Oh, so the PvE one remains. Okay. Like I said, personally, just myself, I am fine with it. I do kind of like that the game is asking you to commit to something. However, I know, and I'm not the biggest PvE player, so I don't want to act like my opinion holds as much weight as some others, but people have been very, very frustrated by this and have I've seen people say they will leave the game if this goes in, so interesting choice there. The gear lock while in conflict remains as is. This I'm totally fine with in all four. I want us to have to commit to stuff when you're in a PvP game mode like that, so I'm good with that. Gear lock while rogue will be reverted and available for testing on PTS Phase 2, so they're not going to have it in the Dark Zone anymore, because that wasn't a thing before. Okay. Additionally, we've introduced the following quality of life changes. You will now be able to switch grenades. That's very good, especially considering we had the grenade wheel. It was very odd that didn't apply to this new system, so that's definitely a positive. You will now be able to switch gear while in the shooting range. That's also super good. It was weird before that you couldn't, given it was like a combat area. You will now have a 1-minute grace period where you're allowed to switch gear after joining another player's session. Also a good thing. Yeah. Thank you again for... Okay, so that's all they're going to say on the gear lock. Actually quite surprised by that. I was pretty certain that after all of the pushback they got in the PvE side of things for this gear lock, that they were going to walk it back. But no, they're doubling down. And it's funny because, again, I'm not somebody who is super opinionated on this, so I don't want to come out there and claim that, it needs to be one way or the other for me to be happy, but I agree with a lot of the things they're saying here, that choosing a strategy and in choosing a build before you engage enemies is an ideal thing, I think, because I don't know, it just creates a better environment, I think personally. I do think it's kind of silly that they're saying introducing the ability to do that adds complexity for the average player. The average player is just not going to do it, right? They don't care. So all it really does is it takes away from the people who have been doing this for the past, almost 5 years of this game being out. And again, if they want to remove that ability, then that's fine. But I don't know. I don't know. I think this is going to be the most controversial thing about all of these developer note changes. So definitely leave your thoughts on this down below. Very curious to hear what people think. Thank you again for partaking in phase 1 of the TU20 PTS, and please do keep your thoughts coming, as the community feedback has always been helpful to us in making the necessary adjustments to the upcoming content. Until next time, the Division 2 development team. Okay, people, those are the developer notes for TU20 PTS phase 1. Again, very pleased that they released this. Hopefully we get more stuff like this in the future. I think hearing motivation and explanations from the developers on certain changes is a very positive and beneficial thing to have. So this is really good. For the most part, I feel like a lot of this is good. I mean, you know, well, stuff about the Dr. Home, the Nemesis and Regulus, the Armor Regen stuff, definitely the turrets and conflicts, the Rogue, Time Marine, the DZ, the Descent changes. A lot of this I'm super happy with. Again, a few items that I'm not so happy with, like the Elmos, what else was it? The Unbreakable thing I think is kind of silly, but as a whole, very happy by a lot of this. And so, yeah, PTS Phase 2, like I said, drops in a week from today on the 19th, so we're going to see all of this stuff in action. We can actually try it out, give more of our feedback. And yeah, as I said, folks, let me know all of your thoughts down below as usual. Can't wait to read through them. And I'm going to cut this off before I go any longer. So have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.